Right now, somewhere over warm ocean water, there's a storm that looks harmless on satellite. Loosely wrapped clouds, a soft spin, nothing that would make a meteorologist's pulse jump. And that is exactly the problem, because some of the deadliest storms in modern history looked exactly like this in the hours before they became monsters. This is the story of rapid intensification, the phenomenon that has quietly rewritten hurricane records again and again. And the last time it happened, it didn't just break a record. It broke a city. Let's start with the number that should scare you more than any wind speed, 24 hours. That's roughly how long it took for one of the most infamous storms in Pacific history to go from a disorganized tropical depression to a Category 5 monster with winds over 200 miles per hour. Not a typo. 200. This was Hurricane Patricia back in October 2015. And for years afterward, meteorologists talked about it the way physicists talk about a black hole. A natural event so extreme it seemed to break the rules of the system that produced it. Patricia formed off the coast of Mexico as an unassuming tropical depression. Forecast models expected it to strengthen. Sure, that's normal. That's what storms do over warm water. But nobody expected what happened next. In under 24 hours, Patricia's maximum sustained winds rocketed upward by well over 100 miles per hour. Its central pressure, the number meteorologists watch most closely because a lower pressure means a more violent storm, plummeted to 872 millibars. To put that in perspective, that's one of the lowest pressures ever recorded in a hurricane anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, in the same rarefied company as legendary storms like Hurricane Wilma. Patricia became, at the time, the strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere by wind speed. It rewrote the book. Forecasters at the National Hurricane Center used words in their advisories that they almost never use. Words like potentially catastrophic and extremely dangerous, typed out in capital letters because the normal vocabulary of hurricane warnings wasn't built for what was coming. For years, Patricia stood alone as the ultimate case study, the storm you'd point to in a classroom or a documentary and say, this is as fast and as violent as intensification gets. It became the benchmark, the nightmare scenario used to test forecast models, the what if that emergency planners built worst-case drills around. And then it happened again. In October 2023, a storm named Otis formed near the southern coast of Mexico, not far from the resort city of Acapulco. On a Tuesday, forecasters described it as a tropical storm, expected to make landfall as, at most, a moderate hurricane. Coastal residents went about their week, hotels stayed open, there was no mass evacuation because there was no reason. According to every forecast model, this was not going to be a historic storm. By Wednesday morning, Otis had slammed into Acapulco as a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds around 165 miles per hour. Read that sequence again. Tropical storm to Category 5 in about 24 hours, directly into a city of nearly 1 million people. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most extreme forecast failures in the history of modern meteorology. Not because forecasters were careless, but because the storm did something that existing models were not built to predict. Otis intensified faster, relative to its starting point, than almost anything on record in that basin. Some analyses placed its rate of strengthening among the fastest ever, measured for an eastern Pacific hurricane approaching land. It didn't just catch a city off guard. It caught an entire scientific discipline off guard. The damage was staggering. Acapulco, a place built for tourism, postcards, and calm blue water, was hit by winds that tore through high-rise hotels like they were made of paper. Windows blew out by the thousands. Roofs peeled off. The storm surge and rainfall combined with the wind to cut off communication, power, and water to much of the region for days. Dozens of people died. Damage estimates ran into the billions of dollars. And through it all, meteorologists were left asking a deeply uncomfortable question. If our models missed this, what else could they miss? That question is the real heart of this story, because rapid intensification is not some rare glitch in the atmosphere. It is becoming disturbingly familiar. Here's what rapid intensification actually means, in plain terms. Meteorologists define it as an increase in a storm's maximum, sustained winds of at least 35 miles per hour within a 24-hour period. That's the technical threshold. Patricia blew past that threshold by a factor of 3 or 4. Otis did too. But even storms that only just clear that bar are dangerous, because rapid intensification almost always happens close to landfall, which means there's less time to warn people, less time to evacuate, less time for infrastructure and emergency services to prepare. So what actually causes a storm to explode in strength like this? It comes down to a small number of ingredients lining up almost perfectly. The first, and most important, is ocean heat. Not just surface temperature, but the depth of that warm water. A storm can chew through a thin layer of warm surface water and stall out if colder water sits just underneath, because its own churning action drags that colder water up and cuts off its fuel supply. But if the warm water runs deep, dozens of meters down, the storm has essentially an unlimited buffet. It keeps pulling up the warm water no matter how hard it churns, and that heat is the engine that drives everything. Evaporation, convection, the towering thunderstorms that wrap around the eye and squeeze the pressure lower and lower. The second ingredient is low wind shear. Wind shear is the change in wind speed and direction at different altitudes, and it acts like a hand tilting a spinning top. It disrupts the storm's vertical structure and can tear it apart before it organizes. When shear is weak or nearly absent, a storm can build a perfectly symmetrical, towering structure, uninterrupted, layer stacking on layer, like a chimney with nothing knocking it sideways. The third ingredient is high atmospheric moisture, particularly in the mid-levels of the troposphere. Dry air can choke a storm, causing the thunderstorms feeding it to weaken through evaporative cooling. Moist air lets that convection run wild. When you line those three factors up, deep warm water, low shear, and a moist atmosphere, you get the conditions for an explosive strengthening event. Both Patricia and Otis found almost textbook perfect versions of this alignment. And here's the part that should genuinely concern you. Those conditions are becoming more common, not less. Ocean heat content, globally, has been trending upward for decades. Warmer oceans don't just mean slightly warmer water at the surface, they mean deeper layers of warm water, the exact kind of fuel reservoir that turns a modest tropical storm into a monster overnight. Multiple studies published in the years following Patricia and Otis found that the frequency of rapid intensification events, especially in the Atlantic and eastern Pacific basins, has been increasing. Storms are intensifying faster, on average, than they did decades ago. Some of the most alarming research suggests that storms are now more likely to undergo rapid intensification, specifically in the 24 to 48 hours before landfall, precisely the window where speed matters most and forecasting margin matters least. This isn't a distant theoretical trend either. In the years since Otis, forecasters have watched several other storms undergo unnervingly fast strengthening close to coastlines, enough that meteorological agencies have begun overhauling how they communicate uncertainty to the public. The old approach, built around a single forecast track and a gradual, predictable strengthening curve, simply doesn't capture the risk of a storm that can transform in the length of a workday. Emergency management agencies have had to rethink evacuation timelines because a forecast that says moderate hurricane in 3 days can no longer be treated as a stable prediction. It can flip into catastrophic hurricane in 18 hours, and increasingly, it has. There's also a deeper, more unsettling layer to this story. Our tools are still catching up. Hurricane forecasting has made enormous strides in predicting the track of a storm and where it's going, but predicting intensity, especially rapid intensification, remains one of the hardest problems in all of meteorology. The atmosphere and ocean interact in chaotic, small-scale ways that are difficult to capture, even with today's most powerful supercomputers and satellite technology. Researchers have poured resources into improving intensity models, incorporating better ocean heat content data, aircraft reconnaissance, and machine learning techniques trained on decades of storm data. Progress has been made. But Otis proved brutally that even with all of that investment, a storm can still slip through the cracks of prediction and detonate almost without warning. So when you hear a phrase like, "the last time a storm intensified this fast, it rewrote the record books," understand that this isn't really about one single storm. It's about a pattern, a chain of events stretching from Patricia in 2015 to Otis in 2023 to whatever storm is quietly organizing over warm water right now that keeps demonstrating the same terrifying truth. The ocean can turn a nothing storm into a historic catastrophe faster than we can prepare for it. Think about what that means if you live anywhere near a coastline in a hurricane-prone region. The instinct many people have is to wait and see, to watch the forecast, wait for the storm to get closer, and make decisions based on how bad it looks a day or two out. That instinct, which used to be reasonably safe, is now a gamble. Acapulco. Residents watched a tropical storm forecast on Tuesday and woke up to Category 5 devastation on Wednesday. There was no multi-day window of obviously worsening conditions to prompt a mass evacuation. The storm didn't give that kind of warning because rapid intensification, by its very nature, refuses to. This is why meteorologists and emergency planners now emphasize something that sounds almost too simple. Prepare based on what a storm could become, not just what it currently is. If you're in a hurricane-prone area and a storm, even a modest one, is heading roughly your way, treat the possibility of rapid intensification as a real scenario, not a freak outlier. Have your evacuation plan ready before the forecast turns dire. Because by the time it turns dire, you may only have hours, not days. It's also worth sitting with the bigger picture here, because this isn't just a story about wind speeds and pressure readings. It's a story about how quickly our world is changing beneath us, often faster than the systems we've built to track it. Patricia rewrote the record books because it was, at the time, considered a once-in-a-generation anomaly, a strange convergence of near-perfect conditions. Otis rewrote them again just 8 years later, this time by exposing how badly our forecasting tools can misjudge a storm that intensifies close to land. The gap between those two record-breaking events is not a coincidence. It's a trend line. And trend lines, unlike single storms, don't dissipate after landfall. So the next time you see a tropical storm forming somewhere over warm, seemingly calm water, something that the news barely mentions, something forecasters describe with words like gradual strengthening, expected, remember Patricia, remember Otis, remember that the ocean doesn't care about our models or our timelines. It only cares about heat and moisture and the absence of anything to tear a storm apart before it becomes something history will remember. Because somewhere, right now, that alignment might already be happening again. And if it is, the record books may be about to get rewritten one more time.